The morning of my only son's wedding, I pressed my favorite dress, curled my hair the way he used to compliment when he was small, and drove 45 minutes through back roads to that chapel with one fragile thing beating in my chest. Hope, not joy, not anticipation, but the quiet, trembling kind that a mother clings to even when every instinct screams, "Turn around." I climbed those weathered stone stairs. White roses draped everywhere like frozen snow. Guests murmured in their Sunday best. Organ music drifted through the oak doors. And then my son stepped into my path, blocked the entrance with his shoulders squared, and stared straight through me with eyes I didn't recognize. "You can't come in, Mom. Nobody wanted you here." His voice didn't crack, not once. The family agreed. "You're not part of this anymore." I stood frozen. 45 minutes of driving. 45 years of being his mother. And he delivered it like he was reading a parking ticket. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't shatter on those steps while every turned head watched. I just met his gaze, clutched my handbag tighter, and spoke 6 quiet words. "All right, but check your phone soon." Then I pivoted, descended those stairs, slid into my sedan, and closed the door softly behind me. Because what nobody in that church understood, not my son, not his bride-to-be, not a single guest in their tailored suits and silk dresses, was that I'd spent the last 10 months constructing something they never anticipated. Truth doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives as a notification at the most inconvenient moment. Stay with me, because this story doesn't conclude on those chapel steps. It concludes with accountability. And I need you to hear every detail. My name is Margaret. And before I tell you what unfolded, you need to understand who I was before any of this began. I wasn't a dramatic woman. I wasn't the mother who called daily or appeared unannounced or turned holidays into battlegrounds. I was the woman who packed sack lunches and worked the graveyard shift at a municipal records office and arrived home at dawn to ensure my son had eggs and toast before school. I was dependable. I was unobtrusive. I was the sort of person the world tends to overlook, which, as it turned out, became my greatest weapon. My husband Robert was cut from the same cloth. Reserved, methodical, patient. He constructed things gradually. A modest fabrication business, some commercial real estate, a handful of prudent investments over 35 years. Nobody suspected how much he'd accumulated because he never discussed it. We still drove aging vehicles. We still occupied the same colonial we'd bought when our son was 4. Robert fell ill when our son Derek was 33. The disease advanced mercilessly, faster than any of us could absorb. In his final weeks, Robert summoned me to his bedside and entrusted me with 2 things: a sealed envelope and a series of very precise directions. He said, "Margaret, what I've built is substantial. Derek doesn't know the scope yet. I need you to safeguard everything, every asset, every document, until you're convinced he's standing on solid ground, not financially, emotionally. I need you to ensure that what I constructed doesn't fall into hands that don't deserve it." I promised him I would. I didn't fully grasp what that commitment meant at the time. 3 weeks after Robert passed, I sat across from our family attorney, a meticulous man named Mr. Thornton, and he opened a file that stole my breath. Robert had left behind far more than I'd ever imagined. 3 industrial warehouses, 2 retail properties, an investment portfolio that had quietly compounded for over a decade, and a private banking account Robert had never mentioned to anyone, not even me. All of it placed under my authority, legally and completely. Derek would be informed eventually, but nothing would transfer to him until I determined he was prepared. Robert had drafted that clause personally, and he'd drafted it with extraordinary care. I honored Robert's wishes exactly. I didn't alter my lifestyle. I didn't inform Derek. I didn't relocate or purchase anything extravagant. I returned to the same house, drove the same car, and continued my quiet existence. And I waited. Vanessa arrived roughly 5 months after Robert's death. Derek introduced her at a Wednesday dinner, which was notable because Derek hadn't attended Wednesday dinner in nearly 2 months. She was impeccable. Heels at a casual family meal, clothing that wasn't flashy but was expensive in a calculated way. Her smile was flawlessly warm. Her eye contact was perfectly measured. But here's the thing about being an observant woman who's spent decades reading people: you detect what polished individuals forget to conceal. Vanessa never glanced at the family photographs on the walls. She never asked a single question about Robert. She never looked at Derek the way someone in love looks at their partner. She studied the house the way an appraiser studies square footage. Within 20 minutes of entering my home, she'd casually inquired whether the property had been in the family long, whether the land extended beyond the back fence, whether I'd considered downsizing now that I was alone. She wasn't making conversation. She was running calculations. I smiled. I answered politely. I refreshed her water glass, and I began watching with intense focus. It happened incrementally. That's what people don't understand. It's never one explosive confrontation. It's 100 small moments, each individually excusable. First, Derek's calls grew less frequent. Twice weekly became once. Once became every other week. And when he did call, our conversations felt rehearsed. Superficial, like he was completing a task. Then Wednesday dinners became irregular. Then they stopped entirely. Then I noticed specific phrases infiltrating his speech. Vanessa thinks. Vanessa feels. Vanessa mentioned. At first it seemed natural. You fall in love, you consider your partner's perspective, but gradually the sentences twisted. Vanessa thinks you call too much. Vanessa feels you don't respect our boundaries. Vanessa mentioned that maybe you weren't as supportive as you believed, and I recognized the pattern because I'd studied it, witnessed it in other families. But you never truly believe it will happen to yours. My son was being systematically distanced from me. The engagement appeared on social media. I discovered it the same way strangers did. A photograph, a ring, a caption announcing the most important people were here. I hadn't been informed, I hadn't been contacted. I wasn't among the important people. I sat with that realization for a long time. Then they arrived at my house together carrying a folder. Vanessa settled across from me at my own kitchen table and explained very warmly, very reasonably, that they were building their future and considering next steps, and that the house, given its size and my solitary status, might serve better as their family home. They'd prepared documents, she said, for my signature. They would ensure I was provided for. Derek sat beside her and said nothing. He observed me the way someone observes a transaction concluding. I looked at my son who used to nap on this kitchen floor surrounded by toy trucks, and I asked him one question. Is this truly what you want, Derek? Is this coming from you? He glanced at Vanessa. He didn't answer. That was my answer. I told them I needed time to consider. I kept my voice steady. I offered them coffee. I escorted them to the door. And when that door clicked shut, I picked up my phone and called Mr. Thornton. What I did next, I did carefully, legally, and with complete documentation. Mr. Thornton connected me with a forensic financial analyst named Patricia, meticulous, thorough, unflappable regardless of what she uncovered. I also conducted my own quiet investigation. Over the following weeks, a picture emerged. Vanessa had a history. She'd been in a previous long-term relationship with an older man of significant means. That relationship had terminated abruptly. There had been a legal dispute involving property. The case had been settled confidentially, and Vanessa had departed with a financial arrangement and a new zip code. There was more. Financial records, accessed through legitimate channels, revealed that in the months since Vanessa and Derek became serious, Derek had obtained a personal loan, a substantial one. The funds had transferred into a joint account opened before their official engagement, an account Vanessa primarily controlled. There was also a recorded conversation, conducted with Derek's awareness and consent during a call, where I informed him I was recording for my personal notes. In that conversation, Derek made several claims about the property and estate that were factually inaccurate in legally significant ways. By the time their wedding date arrived, I possessed a manila folder, a flash drive, and a consultation with Mr. Thornton that concluded with him saying, "Margaret, you are fully protected." What I transmitted to Derek's phone that afternoon at 3:10 p.m., precisely as the processional music began, was not a threat. It was a document. A single PDF forwarded from Mr. Thornton's office. It contained 3 things. A complete accounting of Robert's estate, which Derek had never been shown. A legal notice explaining that under Robert's will terms, the estate transfer had been permanently revoked due to documented evidence of coercion, financial manipulation, and misrepresentation. And a photograph of Vanessa at a notary office 11 days earlier, signing a document under a name that wasn't the name she'd given Derek. Her legal name was different. Her history was different. And now Derek knew. I learned what happened inside that church because Derek called me that same evening. He said Vanessa's name 4 times before he could complete a sentence. The ceremony had halted before it formally began. Derek had gone ashen. He'd retreated to the church's rear corridor. Vanessa had followed him. And whatever transpired in that hallway, I wasn't there to witness it, ended with Vanessa exiting through a side door, climbing into a vehicle that wasn't hers, and not returning. The guests remained in those decorated pews for nearly an hour before Derek emerged, and quietly informed them there would be no wedding. I don't derive satisfaction from chaos. Let me be clear about that. What I derive satisfaction from is this. My son called me that night. He drove to my house. He sat at that same kitchen table where he'd once watched Vanessa request I sign away my home. And he wept in a way I hadn't witnessed since he was small. He said, "Mom, I don't even know who she was." And I placed my hand over his and said, "I know. That's why I had to discover the truth." We remained at that table until nearly midnight. He told me everything, the pressure, the isolation, the gradual, methodical way she'd convinced him I was the problem, controlling, conditional, that distancing himself from me was something he was doing for himself, not for her. And he'd believed it because that's what that kind of influence does. It doesn't feel like influence. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally seeing reality. He hadn't seen reality. I had. In the months that followed, several things transpired. Vanessa didn't simply vanish. She retained counsel and filed a claim against assets she believed she was entitled to based on promises Derek had made. She wasn't entitled to them. Mr. Thornton's documentation was comprehensive enough that her claim was dismissed without proceeding to litigation. The sealed record from her previous legal dispute was surfaced through proper channels and entered into consideration. She settled quietly and relocated to another city. Derek spent several months processing what had occurred. He began speaking with a therapist. He called me more frequently, not every day. We're not those people. But regularly, honestly. The estate, Robert's estate, was eventually transferred to Derek in full under the original terms, which Mr. Thornton confirmed remained intact and legally sound. Derek didn't use it the way Vanessa had planned. He took 8 months. He studied the business. He recruited people Robert had trusted. He made thoughtful decisions. He became gradually, genuinely, the man Robert had hoped he would become. And one afternoon, Derek came to the house and sat across from me, and he asked me something I hadn't anticipated. He said, "Dad wrote you that letter, the sealed one." What did it say? I'd kept that letter for over 3 years. I'd read it once, the night Robert gave it to me, and then I'd folded it and placed it in the back of my nightstand drawer. I rose and retrieved it. I handed it to Derek. He read it silently, and when he finished, his eyes were wet. Robert had written, "If you're reading this, Derek, then your mother did exactly what I asked her to do. She protected you even when you didn't know you needed it, even when you may have pushed her away. She's the finest person I've ever known. Please don't forget that." Derek didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "I won't forget again. I'm not telling this story to position myself as a hero. I'm not certain I am one. I made errors too. Moments I should have spoken sooner. Conversations I avoided because I didn't want to seem difficult. Times I confused maintaining peace with actually having peace. But here's what I know now, after everything. The quietest people in any room are often the ones who perceive the most clearly, not because they're cold, but because they're not performing. They're observing. They're listening. They're constructing something patient and authentic in spaces that louder individuals never think to examine. Vanessa underestimated me because I didn't fight loudly or visibly. She looked at my stillness and saw weakness. She saw an older woman alone in a house, easy to displace. She saw entirely the wrong thing. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who see the most clearly, not because they're cold, but because they're not performing. If you're a mother watching someone slowly pull your child away from you, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Every situation differs. Every family has its own fractures. But I will tell you this. Don't exhaust your energy convincing people of your value. Invest it in documenting it, protecting it. Building quietly while others assume you've already surrendered. Don't exhaust your energy convincing people of your value. Invest it in protecting it while others assume you've already surrendered. The truth doesn't require shouting to be powerful. Sometimes it just needs to arrive as a notification at precisely the right moment. And here's the question I want to leave you with today, the one I still contemplate. How many people in your life right now are being slowly convinced that you're not who you truly are? And what would it take for them to finally see the truth? Think about it. And if this story moved you, if any part of it felt familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories of karma and justice. This is Karma Court Files. We'll see you in the next one.